At 9:27 a.m., 40 Boghammar speedboats surge across the Strait of Hormuz at 52 miles per hour, each one carrying 107mm rockets and enough explosives to reduce a billion-dollar destroyer to burning wreckage. In 33 minutes, the United States Navy is scheduled to seal the strait, but the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has already decided the formal declaration is optional. 1 minute later, at 9:28 a.m., the decision is instantaneous, and the U.S. fleet shifts to an offensive posture 32 minutes early. On the forward deck of a destroyer, the Mark 41 vertical launch system cycles at maximum rate. Missiles streak into the haze, and the water turns into a scene mid-action, mid-decision, mid-collapse that demands to be seen through to its end. Before we dive in, comment where you are watching from and click subscribe. What is at stake is not abstract. It is measured in lives, hours, dollars, and seconds. If the strait closes, global oil flows collapse, shipping lanes freeze, and the economic shockwave hits every port, refinery, and market within hours. The single irreversible moment is the decision to fire first 32 minutes before the blockade was meant to begin, because once the first missile leaves its rail, the entire strategic calculus is permanently altered. This event changes something permanently. It proves that a maritime choke point can be defended in real time or lost in the span of a single unforgiving minute. The unfolding begins at the smallest physical detail closest to the point of failure. On the destroyer's deck, the AGM-114L Hellfire missile, the longbow variant, launches with an internal millimeter wave radar seeker designed to lock onto the thermal bloom of outboard engines. Think of it like a home security sensor that does not need a spotlight. It detects the heat signature of a running motor even through haze, smoke, and glare. Within seconds, the seeker locks and the missile streaks toward its target. You will notice the contrast at once. Cold morning air against the bright thermal bloom of 40 engines running at full power. Silence before impact against the sudden violence of detonation. On the nearby USS Indianapolis, the 57mm Mark 110 cannons open up at 220 rounds per minute. Their shells are fused for airburst destruction, detonating 10 feet above the speedboats to shred crews with a rain of tungsten fragments. One rate of fire against another, 220 rounds per minute versus 40 small craft moving at 52 miles per hour, speed against vulnerability, massed steel against fiberglass. By 9:37 a.m., the swarm is extinct. There are no survivors, only burning oil slicks and sinking fiberglass. The preemptive strike has cleared the board, and the blockade does not begin at 10 a.m. It begins the moment the adversary reaches for its triggers. The White House confirms 158 warships are holding the line. This is the most concentrated display of naval power since the Second World War. 3 carrier strike groups led by the USS Gerald R. Ford, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the USS Ronald Reagan form a wall of steel across the entire entrance to the Persian Gulf. The primary objective is the total kinetic removal of Iran's mine-laying capability. Iran relies on the EM-52 rocket-propelled mine, a weapon that sits on the seabed and waits for the acoustic footprint of an American carrier. To counter it, the Navy deploys MH-53E Dragon helicopters, massive machines that tow the EMAK-105 magnetic mine-sweeping sled. The sled floods the water with a massive electromagnetic pulse, tricking the EM-52 mine into thinking a 100,000-ton carrier is overhead. Think of it like a powerful magnet sweeping across a parking lot to trigger a sensor that expects a large vehicle. The system is engineered to force a reaction at a safe distance. The resulting underwater explosions geyser 200 feet into the air, clearing shipping lanes in violent bursts. You will notice the scale contrast: 100,000 tons of carrier displacement versus a seabed mine designed to detonate under that exact pressure. Stillness below versus 200 feet geysers above. Quiet waiting versus catastrophic ignition. Iran attempts to strike back from the cliffs with the Noor anti-ship missile. The turbojet-powered weapons travel at 690 miles per hour, skimming the water at 30 feet to evade detection. But the Aegis combat system is already locked on. The AN/SPY-1 radar arrays track the missiles while they are still climbing over the cliffs. The response is a wave of RRIM-16, two standard missile surface-launched missiles, interceptors that maneuver at 50 G, faster and harder than any cruise missile on Earth. They collide with the Noor missiles miles out at sea, turning them into fireballs. Anything that slips through is met by the close-in weapons system, which creates a literal wall of 20-millimeter tungsten fire. The operation dismantles Iran's inventory in a matter of hours, measured in intercepts, impacts, and destroyed targets, rather than days or weeks. While the world is mesmerized by fire over the Strait of Hormuz, Russia sees an opening. Its strategic goal is simple. If the US and Europe cannot talk, the blockade fails. Russia deploys its primary undersea predator, the Akula-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, a 360-foot shadow designed to move through the Atlantic without making a sound. Escorting it is the Yantar, a Russian auxiliary research vessel, and a mother ship for deep-sea submersibles built to reach the fiber-optic cables on the ocean floor. These cables are the nervous system of the West, carrying 97% of all transatlantic data. Trillions in bank transfers and every military encrypted command flow through these glass strands. Russia moves to cut them, believing the 158 ships in the Middle East have left the North Atlantic wide open. It thinks the king is too busy in the desert to see the knife moving toward his throat. This global operation is not just about steel and silicon. It is about the people in the dark. Sonar technicians spend 18-hour shifts in a lightless room. Crews of P-8 aircraft fly 10-hour orbits over freezing water. Many watching served on these platforms, from the old P-3 Orions to the modern Arleigh Burke destroyers. If you or a family member served in the silent service or on a patrol squadron like VP-45 or VP-16, drop your ship or squadron in the comments. Your service kept the lights on. The world also watches in horror as a diplomatic disaster unfolds in Washington on live television. President Trump delivers a performance that paralyzes NATO headquarters in Brussels. He calls them idle observers and freeloaders who sat on their hands while the U.S. spent trillions of dollars and deployed 158 warships to hold the line in the Middle East. To anyone watching the news, it looks like a total collapse. This is exactly what the Kremlin has been waiting for since 1945. In Moscow's eyes, it is the ultimate green light. Russia orders the Akula-class submarine and the Yantar to accelerate. But the truth that should chill every adversary of the United States to the bone is this: the entire political firestorm is a lie. The public insults, the leaked arguments are a manufactured script. The alliance is sharpening its teeth in the shadows. The U.S. shows Russia it is leaving the North Atlantic. It publicly orders carrier strike groups and dozens of P-8 Poseidon aircraft to depart their bases in Norway, Iceland, and the UK. At 1400 Zulu, in the North Atlantic, the withdrawn U.S. fleet is not in the Middle East. It is 200 meters off the Irish coast, running under a total electronic blackout. The moment the Russian Akula-class submarine crosses the invisible tripwire of the SOSUS array, the trap snaps shut. The lead P-8 Poseidon aircraft kills its engine stealth profile and banks hard. Its weapons bay doors snap open. It ejects a high-velocity pattern of 60 SSQ-53G sonobuoys. The canisters hit the water at 250 miles per hour, deploying hydrophones that sink to preset depths. Inside the Akula class, A 200 decibel pulse hammers the hull. The Russian crew reacts instantly. They shove the diving planes forward, flooding trim tanks to plunge toward 1,600 feet. They are looking for the shadow zone, a thermal layer where water temperature shifts rapidly, bending sonar waves and creating a blind spot, but the hunt is already inside the layer. A British Type 23 frigate running silent on electric motors slams its Type 287 towed array sonar into active mode. The Russian boat responds by launching a salvo of MG-74 Corundum 2 decoys. The P-8 Poseidon switches to multi-static tracking. One buoy pings and the rest of the grid listens for the specific shadow cast by the massive Russian hull. They ignore the decoys. You will notice the precision. One real acoustic signature against dozens of false ones. A true hull shadow against engineered noise. Patience against panic. The Russian submarine executes a high-speed 360-degree turn designed to clear the sonar dead spot behind its propeller. It is looking for an opening to fire a Type 53 torpedo and blast a hole in the net. It finds nothing but more steel. A U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the USS Donald Cook, appears on passive sonar closing at 34 miles per hour. Two Norwegian Fridtjof Nansen-class frigates flank it. Their A/SQS-56 hull sonars slave to the U.S. data link. The shock hits the Russian bridge. The withdrawn Americans are right on top of them. The Russian submarine is forced into a defensive spiral. It fires high-pressure water jets to mask its propeller noise, but NATO units are now dropping into a smothering pattern, one every 500 yards. The Russian boat is boxed in. Every time it tries to level off, another active ping hits it closer and louder than the last. The pressure intensifies with the AQS-22 dipping sonar from a hovering MH-60R Seahawk punching through the last remaining hiding spot. The U.S. did not leave the Atlantic. It lured Russia into a kill zone where every exit is blocked by a U.S. or NATO hull for 18 days. The pressure is unrelenting. The Russian submarine is denied the ability to surface for fresh air every time it tries to launch its cable-cutting submersibles. A P-8 Poseidon drops a pinger buoy directly onto its hatch, letting the crew know a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo is already zeroed on their position. Inside the submarine, the atmosphere becomes toxic, CO2 levels rise, temperature climbs, and the crew reaches a total psychological breaking point. They are trapped in a 10-meter box of water with no exit. On the 19th day, the ocean surface finally breaches. The Akula class blows its emergency ballast, surfacing in a massive cloud of white foam. It is surrounded by a wall of NATO frigates and shadowed by aircraft. One of the most advanced nuclear submarines in the Russian inventory is grounded until its crew cannot breathe. It is forced into a public surrender. The cables are safe. The hunt is over. Back in the Middle East, the 158-ship blockade is an unbreakable cage. Iran attempts its final strategic move, deploying its 3 Russian-made Kilo-class submarines. These diesel-electric boats are known as the Black Hole because they are nearly silent when running on batteries. Iran believes it can slip under the destroyer screen and sink a U.S. carrier, ending the blockade in one blow. But the U.S. Navy is not hunting with torpedoes. It is hunting with the AN/SLQ-32 V7 electronic warfare suite. As the Iranian Kilo-class boats move into deep water channels, the U.S. initiates an electronic suppression operation. The EW system floods the water with high-gain modulated acoustic interference. It hacks their sonar. The Iranian sonar screens suddenly fill with thousands of ghost targets. Their fire control computers cannot tell the difference between a wave, a whale, or a carrier. You will notice the absurdity laid bare. A system designed for detection becomes a hall of mirrors. Clarity replaced by noise. Certainty replaced by thousands of identical false returns. Then the US severs their communication links. The EW suite cuts the data flow between the submarines and their shore-based headquarters. The Iranian captains are suddenly blind, deaf, and alone. In the shallow, rock-strewn waters of the Persian Gulf, navigating a submarine without sonar is a death sentence. They are terrified of hitting the seabed or colliding with an underwater mountain. The Iranian crews are forced to bottom their boats, sitting on the seafloor with engines off, paralyzed by a technology they cannot even see. The pride of their navy becomes iron coffins, trapped at the bottom of the sea, neutralized without a single explosive being dropped. The results of the 158-ship deployment are absolute. Iran's oil exports hit zero, its economy enters a total tailspin, its fleet of speedboats is scrap metal at the bottom of the Gulf, its invisible submarines are stuck in the mud, unable to move or fight. In the North Atlantic, the Russian Navy retreats in total humiliation. Its attempt to cut the global communication cables is exposed, countered, and defeated by an alliance it thought was broken. The drama between the US and NATO is revealed as the most successful strategic deception of the century. The US Navy proves it is the undisputed master of the environment. It can hold a 158-ship wall in the Middle East while simultaneously winning a silent war in the Atlantic. It has the technology to blind the enemy and the resolve to finish the fight. Despite the political headlines, when the order is given, the US Navy remains the king of all oceans. The blockade holds, the cables are secure, the ocean belongs to us.